An extraordinary day in federal parliament today, a tragic day really, when the ugly divisiveness over the Middle East that we've seen spilling onto our streets took hold in the House of Government. Let me be clear about what's gone on here, because the political spin will be flying thick and fast. Today, the Prime Minister failed to reach across the divide. He rejected the chance for bipartisanship over the commemoration of the October the 7th terrorist victims in Israel. Not only is this a sad day for this country, it's also inexplicable given Anthony Albanese says he gets this central point.
It is the terrorists of Hamas that are not only enemies of Israel, they are an enemy of the Palestinian people as well.
That is so true, yet Albanese has allowed Hamas and its evil actions and propaganda to divide our parliament. This shouldn't be about politics, it's about simple respect for humanity. Yet Albanese could not find a way to just recognise the victims, condemn the terrorists and respect the country that had experienced this vile and barbaric attack a year ago yesterday. No, the Prime Minister rejected that sort of emotion, one that would have received bipartisan support from the coalition, and instead he put forward a lengthy motion dealing with a host of other issues to do with the current conflict and putting pressure on Israel for a ceasefire. Just a terrible look for our parliament, and the long-standing bipartisan support for Israel in this country now seems lost. Let me explain how this unfolded. It began with an idea from the opposition leader.
On Saturday, I wrote to the Prime Minister suggesting that we should arrive at a bipartisan position and bring a motion before the House to mark the anniversary of October 7. This motion was supposed to be about October 7, about the loss of human life in the circumstances that we've just graphically outlined and that people across the world now come to understand.
Who could oppose that? Why wouldn't Labor support that? Well, many would say electoral politics, not wanting to offend some Muslim voters in key electorates. I think that's a factor for sure, but it's a bit more complicated than that, and in some ways even more worrying. I think it goes to the innate weakness of the Prime Minister and his activist background. He and Foreign Minister Penny Wong are members of the socialist left faction. They're former university activists, and they just haven't gotten across these issues properly. They don't understand what drives Islamist extremist terrorism, and nor do they seem to grasp what Israel is up against. So Albanese put up his own motion that was long-winded and tried to please everyone.
We encourage all parties to engage constructively to de-escalate the current tensions. International humanitarian law must be respected. We also reiterate our call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
Albanese's motion even talked about Palestinian casualties, of which, of course, there were none on October the 7th. It was this terrorist atrocity that instigated a response from Israel days later. Peter Dutton was not going to have any of Albanese's equivalents.
There are other sections here which go well beyond the intent of what should be a motion to mark the loss of life of 1,200 people on the first anniversary. That's what this motion was to be about. But of course the Prime Minister is trying to speak out of both sides of his mouth. And that is not something that we will support in relation to this debate.
So instead of the Australian Parliament standing up in unison to commemorate the 1,200 victims of terrorism in southern Israel and call for the release of 101 hostages still held by Hamas, we have a Parliament divided.
This government has sought to walk both sides of the street in relation to what has been a very divisive debate for our country. It's what in part has given rise to the anti-Semitism that we've seen in university campuses, but across society more generally. It's what's making the survivors of the Holocaust for the first time in their lives in our country so that they feel unsafe here in the current environment. There has been a position of bipartisanship on these issues, and your predecessors would have had the decency to respect the Jewish community in a way that you have not done today. And for that, Prime Minister, you should stand condemned.
Yeah, this is a terrible turn of events, a real schism now over the Middle East. Albanese's weakness and ambivalence over Israel is now completely exposed. He's tried to appeal to the hard left and to the United Nations activists and to local Muslim communities instead of standing up for Israel and a rules-based global order and against terrorism and its sponsor nations. Have a listen to these platitudes.
We remain committed to a two-state solution as the path to an enduring peace. Yeah. Two states, Israel and Palestine, living peacefully side by side with prosperity and security for their people. A position that has been bipartisan in this parliament for a long period of time. There can be no possibility of a just future without that.
Well, yeah, we all want to love each other and live happily ever after, but a two-state solution is further off now than it was just over a year ago. Surely Albo doesn't buy the spin that Hamas wants a two-state solution, that Hezbollah wants a two-state solution, that Iran wants a two-state solution. It's fanciful. They're all committed viscerally to the elimination of Israel. So to pretend otherwise is just madness. And what would a ceasefire achieve except allow terrorists to regroup? Who would sign up to it? Hamas? Hezbollah? Iran? What then? Have a look at this map and ponder this. Look at the territories of Gaza, run by Hamas, and the West Bank, encircling Jerusalem and run by the Palestinian Authority. If a two-state solution existed along those borders tomorrow, Israel would have Hamas and Hezbollah and other jihadist terrorists filling those areas within a stone's throw of Israeli towns and suburbs, armed and controlled by Iran, just like the Hezbollah terrorists in southern Lebanon. I mean, Israel would just be bringing its mortal enemies closer, having an effective border with Iran in Jerusalem. It just cannot happen and will not happen. And pretending it's the solution to this crisis at this time is the ultimate in naivety. The way to peace for Palestinians is peace. Imagine if the past 2 decades of autonomy in Gaza with countless billions in aid had been spent turning it into a prosperous, peaceful territory. Then a two-state solution might be closer. But instead they backed in Hamas, amassed weapons, built tunnels and installations in residential areas and attacked Israel. The political grandstanding of the left can't change any of that reality. Anthony Albanese and Labor are getting a hard lesson in the difficulties of running national government and foreign affairs. University activism just doesn't cut it. Real-world experience and real-world decisions are needed. But we see none of that from Labor. At the end of question time, Peter Dutton tried again to put up a motion commemorating the victims of October the 7th, and Labor voted it down. Meanwhile, in the Senate, this hatred and madness was put on full display by the Greens, criticising Israel and calling for sanctions against it. Just a gross insult to all those Israeli victims massacred on October the 7th. What a dismal day for our national parliament. What a dismal day for our country.